Amazon's ambitious fantasy series, The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power wrapped up its second season recently, and for many fans, it left much to be desired. Despite its enormous budget and the legacy of Tolkien's world to draw from, the series continues to fall short in several critical areas. Season 2 not only failed to correct the glaring issues from the first season, but also introduced new problems, further alienating fans of the original works. Today we dive into the 5 major shortcomings of the series, exploring how these issues undermine what could have been an incredible adaptation of Tolkien's Second Age. Deviations from Tolkien's lore serve no purpose. One of the most frequent criticisms of the Rings of Power is its extensive deviation from Tolkien's established lore. While some changes are inevitable in adaptations, they must serve a clear narrative purpose. The compression of Tolkien's Second Age, which spans thousands of years, into a timeline of mere months or years, is a particularly egregious example. This drastic alteration not only disregards the source material, but also creates narrative inconsistencies. For instance, the show's decision to create the 3 elven rings at the end of Season 1 disrupts the chronology of Anatar's, Sauron's, interactions with Celebrimbor, a storyline with immense potential that now feels rushed and incoherent. The simultaneous portrayal of events like the forging of the rings and the fall of Numenor, which occur centuries apart in the lore, further undermines the storytelling. By condensing everything, the series sacrifices the depth and grandeur of Tolkien's world. Perhaps the most baffling change is the relationship dynamic between Galadriel and Sauron. Fans have dubbed this connection a bizarre fling, with some viewers even shipping the pair romantically. This bizarre subplot starkly contrasts with Tolkien's portrayal of these characters, suggesting that the creators prioritize trendy social media moments over faithful storytelling. Such unnecessary alterations make the show feel more like fan fiction than a genuine homage to Tolkien's work. Overcrowded storylines and characters. One of the most glaring issues with the Rings of Power is its overly ambitious ensemble cast and the sheer number of storylines crammed into each episode. The series attempts to balance numerous plots and characters, but this approach often leads to shallow and underdeveloped arcs. For instance, Valandil, a Númenórean character who meets a tragic end in Season 2, fails to evoke an emotional response from viewers because his character was barely fleshed out. His death, which could have been impactful, instead feels hollow and rushed. Even characters introduced as key figures, such as Arondir, a Sylvan elf from Season 1, remain frustratingly one-dimensional. While positioned as a central character, Arondir's role is reduced to performing acrobatic combat stunts, with little meaningful development. Secondary characters like Ryan, whose death mirrors Boromir's noble sacrifice in the Fellowship of the Ring, are similarly wasted, as their limited screen time leaves viewers indifferent to their fates. This overcrowding is further compounded by the compressed timeline, which rushes through major events and prevents the audience from forming deeper connections with the characters. By adhering to a more structured chronology, the show could have spread its expansive cast and storylines across the 5 planned seasons more effectively. For example, Númenor's political intrigue, which currently feels rushed and underwhelming, could have been introduced in later seasons. This would have allowed earlier seasons to focus on the forging of the rings and the rise of Sauron, giving these pivotal moments the depth and attention they deserve. Additionally, the overcrowded nature of the series undermines its ability to create memorable character arcs. Instead of focusing on a few well-developed characters and their journeys, the show scatters its attention, leaving most characters feeling like afterthoughts. This not only dilutes the emotional impact of the story, but also detracts from the immersive quality of the world. By trying to do too much, The Rings of Power ends up doing very little well, leaving viewers struggling to connect with its sprawling ensemble, a lack of attention to detail and plausibility. For a series with one of the highest production budgets in television history, The Rings of Power often feels surprisingly careless in its world-building and internal logic. Scenes regularly defy plausibility, making it difficult for viewers to stay immersed. For example, Durin IV's discovery of the Balrog in Khazad-dûm occurs after mining through a laughably thin wall, as though no dwarf had ever bothered to explore that area before. Similarly, Disa's orb rolling into a supposedly undiscovered cavern feels like a contrived plot device, undermining what should have been moments of awe and danger. Such oversights betray the lack of meticulous planning required for an immersive fantasy world. Battle sequences also highlight the show's disregard for plausibility. The siege of a region features orcs dragging massive siege engines with ease, only for these engines to knock down entire mountaintops which were conspicuously absent in Season 1. but somehow struggle against city walls. Injuries are treated with the same lack of realism. Arondir, for instance, recovers from a seemingly fatal wound without explanation, cheapening the stakes of such encounters. This disregard extends to the geography of Middle-earth itself. Key locations like Numenor, Rhûn, and Mordor appear to be just a short stroll or quick sea voyage away, robbing the world of its epic scale and grandeur. This careless compression diminishes the sense of vastness and adventure that Tolkien's works are celebrated for. By contrast, Peter Jackson's films excel at emphasizing the immense distances and the arduous nature of the characters' journeys, immersing the audience in a richly detailed world. The show's failure to replicate this scale, coupled with its hasty and inconsistent storytelling, leaves Middle-earth feeling small, disconnected, and unworthy of its grand legacy. Clunky and overwrought dialogue. The dialogue in The Rings of Power alternates between overly simplistic and unnecessarily florid, often failing to capture the elegance of Tolkien's prose. In one notable scene, Celebrimbor gravely declares to Annatar, "You are the Lord of the Rings," a line so on the nose that it borders on parody. Similarly, Galadriel's hissed command to an orc to go back to the shadow feels like a poor imitation of lines from The Lord of the Rings. The show's penchant for grandiose monologues during dramatic moments often falls flat. For instance, Poppy's speech to the Stores about loss and rebuilding comes across as unearned and uninspiring. Intended to evoke Sam's iconic speeches from Jackson's trilogy, it instead feels hollow because Poppy's character lacks the development needed to make her words impactful. Adding to the problem is the show's tendency to recycle lines and tropes from Tolkien's works without understanding their original context. Gandalf's new nickname, Grand Elf, is a cringe-worthy example of this, while lines like "A wizard does not find his staff," the staff finds the wizard feel like cheap imitations of better dialogue from other franchises. A lack of stakes. One of the most glaring issues with The Rings of Power is its inability to establish genuine stakes, leaving the audience disengaged. Prequels inherently struggle with maintaining tension since viewers often know the general outcome of the story. However, successful prequels like Better Call Saul navigate this challenge by focusing on unpredictable character arcs and subplots that captivate the audience. In contrast, The Rings of Power fails to develop its original characters in a way that fosters emotional investment. Major characters like Galadriel and Elrond are shrouded in plot armor, making their survival a foregone conclusion, while newer characters like Nori and Dissa seem untouchable, as the show avoids taking meaningful risks with their stories. The downfall of Numenor, one of Tolkien's most tragic and significant events, falls flat because the series fails to portray Numenor as the grand, awe-inspiring civilization that the books describe. Instead of being moved by the impending catastrophe, viewers are left detached. Without stakes, dramatic moments lack weight. Characters routinely survive dire situations and seemingly fatal injuries, eroding the tension and diminishing the believability of the story. Even significant deaths, such as Celebrimbor's, feel rushed and emotionally hollow due to the poor pacing and lack of narrative build-up. By not allowing the audience to truly fear for the characters or become invested in their struggles, the series undermines its own dramatic potential, leaving it with little more than hollow spectacle. Thanks for watching, folks. If you made it this far, you deserve your own Ring of Power, just maybe not one forged by these writers. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe unless, of course, you're too busy mining through thin walls in Khazad-dûm. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next dive into pop culture chaos because, unlike Numenor, we're not going anywhere.